Schwarzenegger's name. I'd like to believe that Texans are at least as smart as Californians.
Okay, let's recap. So, ballots were first printed in Texas starting in, what, 1903 or 7, maybe?
1904, I believe
1904. Okay, and from what I have, from that time until 1967, the only requirement that you had to be on the ballot was to submit your name to the appropriate authorities, correct?
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
And also what you're telling me, prior to 67, there were only 6... Maximum 6 parties on the ballot.
So there was no clutter.
So, again, our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers certainly had more freedom on the ballot than we did. Okay. And let's now talk about, are you clear, Jared, on why in the primaries you cannot vote for an independent or third-party candidate?
By the way,
it's the law that the Democrats and the Republicans make.
Mm-hmm. There is a corollary to that should be mentioned, too.
Anti-competition law, excuse me.
If, for example, and you may have experienced this yourself, if the way the laws are set up, if you vote in either Republican or Democratic primaries, not only are you excluded from signing a ballot petition of another party, but you are officially, in the eyes of the state, legally a member of one of those two parties, even if 2 weeks later you join the Constitution Party. Until the following January 1st, you cannot be officially recognized as a member of that party, even if you're a dues-paying member. You cannot run for or hold office in that party or anything.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about the legality, the national rulings on the ballot access laws. I find it very interesting. Now, from my research, in 1968, the Supreme Court said to have these terribly restrictive ballot access laws violates the 14th and the First Amendment. I'll speak to that.
Well, it's one of those situations when the court ruled and the people in the respective states decided that I guess we can ignore that because they have the Supreme Court has no policing power, so we're going to do what we please, and that's exactly what's happened.
Because then I read in 1971, then the court said, well, we're only going to say it's unconstitutional. Let me get this: if the laws were so difficult that virtually no one could ever use them. They reversed themselves. They just didn't have the guts to say it. They reversed themselves.
Well, in other words, the 14th Amendment really doesn't mean what the plain language is.
Exactly. And then I read in 1991, the Ninth Court of Appeals said that, and get this, it's legal for states to eliminate write-ins.
Which, it goes without saying that we have heard increasingly over the last 3 or 4 decades that the Supreme Court just on its own and other federal courts have been totally out of control, and they make things up as they go along, even using foreign law. So that they have done it in this area, it's just piling on. They've become politicized organizations every bit as much as the election department and at the Texas Secretary of State's office.
Well, is it fair to say that the United States of America has the most severe, restrictive ballot access laws of any free nation?
Well, if you want to call us a free nation in that sense.
Well,
yes, I would say so.
Let that sink in.
Yeah.
I mean,
how do you define freedom if you don't have the freedom to vote for whoever you wish or run if you're a law-abiding citizen? Where do you start, making the cut?
All right. How many signatures and how much does it cost to get a third-party candidate on the ballot to run for president?
In the state of Texas?
In general and the state of Texas?
Some places are less restrictive. Most of the ones that are particularly restrictive, though not all.
Well, let's do general.
Okay, general in the South, but there's also California if you're starting out, or Arizona, Indiana, West Virginia. West Virginia is horrible.
Oh, is it?
West Virginia, when you're going, they have a reverse process. They have to do it before the primaries, and they have to, if a petitioner goes and asks anyone to sign his or her ballot petition, the first thing they have to say under law, if you sign my petition, you cannot vote in a primary, and if they don't say that first, or something roughly like that, they have committed a crime and they can be thrown in jail.
Mm-hmm. Make it as easy as they can, don't they?
And but we have, Texas is horrible. Oklahoma's worse. North Carolina, Georgia and Virginia are very bad in different ways. it's screwed up in different directions. But just speaking of Texas, on average, if you were going to pay professional petitioners, if you were trying to get out of the blocks, if you have the money, doesn't matter whether your ideas are wonderful or not, they may be, you're essentially going to have to pay on average about $2, $1 to $2, usually closer to $2 per ballot petition. That's the way it works, per signature. Per signature. So, given the fact that in Texas you have to have cleared right close to 45, that doesn't include the ones that are going to be thrown out. And you know that the elections division at the Secretary of State is going to throw out a lot. I mean, they did with Kinky Friedman. They did with Carol Strayhorn.
Right. The state always challenges the
and so
right.
They'll throw out tens of thousands off
right.
times. And so basically you got to get about, just if you want 45,000, you better shoot for 80 or 90,000.
Now,
That's
how
reality.
long do you have?
75 days.
So you're trying to get around 75,000 in 75 days.
Do the math. It's not hard.
1,000 a day?
Yeah.
Did you know this?
No, this is all new to me. I would just like to know how would a third party be able to come into Texas and be able to qualify and get themselves started? I mean, if we could somehow get those laws passed, or third parties are candidates, they can run the
Well,
programs.
yeah, I mean, I have no doubt that a good third party with good beliefs in I'll submit ours, the Constitution Party. By the way, that's www.cptexas.org. I'm just going to give a little plug there.
All right, give your phone number.
And that's 1-866-CP-TEXAS.
Okay.
And that's www.constitutionparty.org or .com, either one at the national level. For those outside of the state.
So basically, you've got to have an army ready, or you've got to have the money.
Yeah, or both.
Right after the primaries, you hit the dusty trail, and you've got 75 days.
Yes, and I believe I gave Jared a copy of, or do you have a copy of the ballot?
I do not have that.
Yes, sir. You gave me a copy of that.
Yeah, did you bring it?
No, I did not bring that up.
So you're talking.
I'm guilty as charged right now.
Okay, so all right. So the money. How much money? Let's
Well, we're
get
talking. Just do the math. Say if we're saying $2 a signature, say 80,000, 160,000 bucks.
And where does this money come from?
It's going to have to come out of either some rich person's pocket or pockets, or more often just poor folks, because most people are starting. They may have wonderful ideas. And most of the time when you have people who are concerned about change, they're not usually in the elites. The elites, that's the status quo, is probably fine with them. Most people don't get a Ross Perot.
My question is how come the media doesn't ever pick things like this up? How come the mass media doesn't look and say, our country's very limited. We have these two people to choose from, yet there's so many more other candidates that could be just as great, if not better. Why? Why don't they address that? Why do they do that?
Well, there's several factors that play in here. Number one, you can always follow the money. Oftentimes, the people who are in media and involved in big-time politics, whether by paying or in buying influence or selling it or whatever, oftentimes you'll find the same names involved, like Rupert Murdoch, and some others. But more regularly, if you look at the media, and I'm not going to tell you something you don't already know, many of them like the fact, they're comfortable with the fact, maybe even lazy with regard to the fact, that if you can take your microphones and cameras and put them in one or two places and just say, talk to this guy might like this guy better than this guy, but this is what my work is, and everything's going to be taken care of. And at the same time, it's cheaper to do that because I'm not going to cover all these others. Finally, if there's only two people or two parties or whatever that I have to deal with, let's not lose sight of the ego boost here when you get to play kingmaker. And let's face it, the media does. It's obvious that the big media tries to play kingmaker.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of these excuses, because I'm sitting here listening, I'm thinking, some people are going to be watching this and think, well, if you guys can't get 1% of the vote, you shouldn't be on the ballot, or why throw my vote away on somebody that doesn't have a chance? You hear all this. But what I find even more interesting is the excuses, when I was doing my research, that they give to why they won't open up the ballot. And they are, too many candidates will confuse the voters.